So a team that the Los Angeles Lakers should definitely keep an eye out for are the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors really kind of put themselves in this awkward position with the Brandon Ingram situation. I mean, even Rich Paul was like, dude, we wouldn't have gotten like money in the bank, baby, but we would have gotten that anywhere else, right? It was just kind of, Toronto kind of put themselves in this Hail Mary. NBA execs are already talked about it, right? It's already being painted as like, hey, this was a desperation move by Ochai Agbaji, and it just, maybe it works out, but probably not. They're paying him quite a bit of money and could end up putting them in a tough spot. Obviously, they recently hired Bobby Webster to kind of take over at the helm for the Toronto Raptors. And, Lakers have several needs that could be addressed that Toronto, if they're looking to kind of retool things and get off of guys and clear some salary, especially with Brandon Ingram's contract, they may need to do that, especially guys like Scotty Barnes and whatnot. There is the potential the Lakers could really come in and kind of actually be an organization that a team like the Toronto Raptors really looks to go and trade with, right? You could have the Toronto Raptors calling the Lakers once we get close to the trade deadline, because the Lakers have like 40 plus million in expiring contracts that Toronto might just say like, hey man, like just take some of these guys from us, just so that way they can retool, especially with an organization that's in the middle of kind of this transition period. See that a lot. You see kind of new GMs come in, kind of take losses and eat some crow from the previous GM just to kind of get things in order, so that way they can kind of retool, reshape, and do the things that they need to do. So Toronto might be an organization that the Lakers can kind of go to, look to maybe make some trades and make some moves for, without having to break the bank and sell the farm, because it's kind of like, hey, you guys need to get off of some salary, right? And there's not a lot of teams that have 60 million in expiring contracts to kind of help you in that regard. Now that doesn't mean if you're the Lakers you just get all crazy and it's like, yeah, you take this guy and this guy and this guy, would just give us whatever. But you look at the Toronto Raptors and they do have some players that really could make some sense. Not a Brandon Ingram. Stay away from Brandon Ingram at 40 plus million. I love Jakob Poeltl, but like, I don't think him and, DeAndre Ayton really make sense as like a starting, front court. You could argue because DeAndre Ayton can spread the floor. Maybe if he can kind of spread it enough to the 3-point range, but even then I think it'd be a little awkward, and I'm sure Jakob Poeltl's not going to want to come off the bench, but I mean, you want to talk about that defensive kind of center that could just bring some toughness and defend on the inside and interior, right? I would love to have a Jakob Poeltl, right? Just kind of be that anchor. In a perfect world, he's coming off the bench in place of a DeAndre Ayton, and you kind of just have those two guys and maybe even at times play those two and kind of work it out. But again, Brandon Ingram I'd stay away from. Emmanuel Quickly I'd stay away from. Brandon Ingram I'd stay away from. Obviously they're not going to trade guys like Scotty Barnes, but you start getting into guys like, RJ Barrett. He's a guy that could slot in 2 or 3 that I wouldn't hate to have, right? Like a guy that can create his own shot, shoot the basketball, play on ball, play off ball. Kind of just seems like a guy that's just needs to go to a new place. Plus, Toronto's been shopping him and have at least had the intentions before, with Ujiri, where, maybe that's changed. But he was a guy that they at least had interest in potentially trading at some point, right? So he's a guy that also contract-wise kind of lines up to what the Lakers are looking for. He's young to where he could kind of be a piece, not just now, but the long term. I mean, talk about a guy that's currently 25 years old, 6'6", 6'7", slot in at your 2, slot in at your 3, give you some scoring ability. I mean, I think he kind of makes a little more sense alongside Luka than even Austin Reeves does. Better defensively. He's not really like known as this like super great defensive stopper, but he is a guy that can get after it defensively when he's bought in and engaged. And maybe on a team like the Lakers, he might be more bought in and engaged. Right? He's got more size, but he has the offensive ability where you can just give him the basketball and he can just go to work. He can make some plays for others, rebound the basketball, but he also can play off ball, catch a shoot, he's a better 3-point shooter, right? Like, so again, he's a guy that I do think has that potential, can make some sense. Agbaji is another guy who's young, 25 years old. Talk about a guy that's, that 6'5", 6'6", versatile, sought in 2 and 3, but defend 1 through 3 for you. Give you some defensive versatility. Give you some guys, right? Could you maybe work something out where you can get both? Or maybe you're bringing in an RJ Barrett and I mean, maybe he's slotting in at your 3, and you're bringing in an Agbaji slotting in at your 2, and now you have just kind of that athleticism, that defense, and that versatility there, the scoring, the shooting, all of those things. Agbaji, I think, is a guy, I've talked about him on several occasions as a guy that could kind of come in, play a role for the Lakers, would be cheap. I don't think you'd have to sell the farm to go get. RJ Barrett would probably be, I don't know how much they'd be willing to kind of just give him up for, right? I would imagine that they probably want some assets, but, it also depends on the market. Like, how many teams need an RJ Barrett for one? How many teams are willing to pony up multiple firsts and stuff for an RJ Barrett? And again, expiring contracts, right? If Toronto gets to that position, gets in that spot where it's like, hey, like, we just kind of need to clear salary, and the only options that we have are taking on, more salary or salary period, right? Like, that might give the Lakers kind of a leg up on some of these other teams, right? Because, if an RJ Barrett becomes available, there are going to be other teams that would like him and maybe throw their hat in the ring for him. But the Lakers' kind of advantage point, and I think you're going to see this regardless, this offseason, is the expiring contracts. I just think are going to have a ton of value. Talked about on several occasions, they're appreciating assets. And the more and more that we kind of move into and get closer to the trade deadline, the more that those expiring contracts are going to carry that weight to where teams, like I mentioned, a team like Toronto, I could see them picking up the phone and calling the Lakers and hitting up Rob and being like, hey, Rob, what do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? We'd really love to kind of clear the deck here a little bit. Let's try to work on a trade that makes sense for all parties, right? Maybe you're throwing in, Dalton Connect, like, hey, we're taking on the salary, we're taking long term. Here's Dalton Connect for the services. You're throwing in pick swaps or whatever, right? Again, it's got to make sense for the Lakers too, right? And you have to factor in if it is something where, like, you're trying to clear salary, that has to factor in. That is a benefit that you're gaining that we're not. And also, you got to keep in mind the Lakers want to preserve cap space for 2027. So any type of moves or trades that they make is probably going to have that in mind, right? They're not going to just be running to the door to go and take on a bunch of long-term salary. They have several guys that, they're probably going to have to make some decisions on, that they're probably going to, get some guys that might start getting an itch, might go like, hey, you know what? Like, let's make a move and get off of these guys. They have, Jamison Battle, who is a guy 6'7", versatile forward, 24 years old, right? They have a lot of just young guys that, they don't have to rush to go trade. They don't have to hurry to go make a move, but guys that, they might want to, like, hey, let's kind of combine the, or again, if you're clearing some salary, maybe it's like, hey, we throw in a Battle, right? Like, throw in a guy, that can kind of help, or to match salaries or whatever, to kind of dump it out, right? We're helping you clear the deck here a little bit. Give us one of these young guys to kind of, throw in, because they're not getting playing time, or they're not that, and, we're going to need kind of cheap talent the next, year or two as we're kind of getting in and trying to preserve cap space and stuff like that. Could make some sense for a team like the Lakers. It's just, again, what would Toronto be looking for in that type of trade? Like, because again, if they're like, okay, well, we'll give you, Agbaji and an RJ Barrett, but we want Reeves and a first and Rui and all this other, it's like, no, like, it doesn't make sense, right? It's got to make sense.